Hey guys, here we go with a kind of a different kind of video than I've done before. It's going to be, I'm not going to be doing any film study or talking about like boxing theory or talking about anything in the ring about boxing. Probably, I'll probably get a tangent there and, start talking about, skills and stuff when I start talking about the articles. But what I wanted to talk about, it's kind of a different kind of episode where I'm going to go over a bunch of like boxing news articles and read the headlines. I'm probably not going to read the articles, right? But kind of talk about them and talk about what I think about them and kind of, not like a podcast style. I guess it kind of might be. Maybe I can start using my my webcam. Let me know if you guys like to see that too. I'm just actually sitting here in my fucking work uniform, just chilling in my computer. But let me know if you guys would be interested in me using my webcam. Maybe that'll make it a little better for you guys to connect with me or whatever. But I'm going to be going over a bunch of boxing articles and talking about them and kind of maybe going in depth about some of the interesting things that I think about them, and I'm kind of interested to hear about what other people think about them too. I don't usually like the comment section of articles, although because people kind of get kind of crazy, but maybe we'll have some interesting topics to talk about in the comments. But so anyway, let's go ahead and start. I'll start on Ring TV. .com. I'll be looking at their little clickbaity things. Oh, and if you guys have any suggestions for places to get boxing articles, like where they have good articles, where the writers might be good, or they talk about or they do boxing announcements. I don't even know where to get announcements, for what fights are being made or whatever. I don't usually pay a lot of attention to that, but more recently I have been, just because of my boxing channel. But anyway, the first piece of notable news is Roy Jones Jr. just had his farewell bout, and one of the articles says, "Is Roy Jones Jr.'s last bout truly his farewell to boxing?" What do you guys think? You guys think that Roy Jones Jr. is going to fight again? I don't know, man. He should have kind of given it up a while ago. I think he really showed, it's not his age, like his speed. He's still fast. He still hits hard, but fighters are just so much better nowadays than they were when he was in his prime. Fighters overall, especially the Eastern European ones, or any of the European ones, anyone from across, from Russia, all of those places, because their boxing program has been so much more elaborate, like the Cubans as well, right? Because winning gold medals and having those boot camp style lifestyles when they grow up, they've just been so much more intense training, very similar to the intense training that Roy Jones Jr. got when he was a kid, talking about, like, if you've ever seen any of his documentaries, talking about how he used to fight two guys in the ring at once, or his dad would tie his arm around his back and make him fight somebody, or fight two guys, and how he would have like really crazy fights, like, in his training, when he was a kid, when he was young, to prepare him for being a professional fighter. But the world has kind of caught up to him, and especially in terms of boxing skills, especially now that we have things like YouTube, where you can go and watch any fight anytime, and you can study people. You don't have to go out and request the fight and buy it, and it's not like this big ordeal to kind of study your opponent anymore, or to study how your opponents get better. It's much easier to do that now, and Roy Jones Jr.'s skills just haven't they haven't caught up. They haven't been keeping up with the generations. Their fighters are just getting better now because knowledge is just so much more prevalent. But will this be his last fight? To be honest, I don't really think so. I don't know. He was talking about wanting to fight Anderson Silva from the UFC, and to be honest, you know, a lot of people probably don't think that would be a good fight, but Anderson Silva is a good fucking boxer, man. He's legit, you know. He's not like talent-wise like a prime Roy Jones, but for all intents and purposes, I would say he's a better fighter than Roy Jones Jr. in understanding feinting and probing and how to set his punches up, because in mixed martial arts, that is so much more important than it is in boxing. You know, it's important in boxing too. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm always preaching that. But in mixed martial arts, if you don't set your punch up right or you don't set your takedown right, you're going to get kneed in the head and someone's going to cave your goddamn skull in. But anyway, you know, that would be one of the fights that I could see him fighting, especially since Anderson Silva is about to get banned from mixed martial arts forever because testing positive for steroids. You know, and to be honest, you know, in that regard for him, I don't really even have a problem with him taking, I think it was testosterone. And he's an old guy, you know. If you're like an older guy and you're fighting, like, this is like a philosophy thing, you know. Obviously, like, a lot of people are going to disagree, so feel free to disagree about this. But just thinking about it as like a level playing field, if you're fighting a guy who has high levels of testosterone because he's young, right? Aren't you at a disadvantage because you're old and you have low levels of testosterone? Why does it make it less fair of a fight because you take testosterone so that you can have an adequate amount like your opponent, right? Just because you're older, right? And that's just like some philosophy about it, right? That's not necessarily the right way to think about it, because it's not natural, because you're older, you have more experience, so maybe you should have these deficits in your skill or your physicality. But it's just really interesting to me that things like testosterone are such a huge point of contention, especially like if you have low testosterone and you take it to get an adequate amount, and they find out that it was synthetic, even though your levels are in normal range, right? But anyway, I think that would be a great fight, to be honest. And it would be really fun. Anderson Silva doesn't have the kind of power to knock Roy Jones Jr. out. So it would be a really fun fight to watch. It'd be really interesting. And I would definitely watch it. The next piece of news, I'm going to move on from the Roy Jones stuff. The next piece of news, and this is some really interesting stuff, and there's a lot to talk about on this. Vasily Lomachenko. I don't know who he's fighting next. I think there was an article actually that was talking about it. Let me go ahead and, well, let me see. I'll Google it. Vasily Lomachenko. So he's supposed to be fighting someone soon. And then there's talk about him fighting Jorge Linares. But I wonder if that's even going to be his next fight. I guess it could be. May 12th, that's 3 months away. That'd be enough time for a good camp for him. But I thought that he might be having a fight before then. I mean, he only needs about a 6 week camp. But fighting Linares is really interesting. You know, definitely really interesting to me. I think that Linares will very likely get smashed. I don't think he's gonna have a real chance to beat Lomachenko. But it's gonna be a good fucking fight. You know, even though Linares, you know, has the, you know, he bleeds a lot, you know, so sometimes he gets cut and he bleeds a lot. He's a warrior, you know, he fights hard. I don't think that Linares beats Mikey Garcia either. And this is the really interesting thing is if Linares loses his titles to Lomachenko, is Mikey Garcia going to come down and wait to fight him? You know, is Mikey Garcia going to say, hey, okay, I'll come back down to 135 and fight Lomachenko? Or is he going to say, no, I'm going to stick to 140 or 147 and fight Spence, you know? Which would be, God, that would be an amazing fight. To be honest, that would be a goddamn amazing fight, Spence and Mikey Garcia. But what is Mikey, because I know that Mikey Garcia, I read another article that Mikey Garcia was threatening Linares, saying that if you fight Lomachenko, I will never fight you, right? Now, is that because he doesn't want Lomachenko? He doesn't want Lomachenko to beat Linares and take the titles, so that Mikey Garcia has a reason to move down in weight, or is he saying that because I don't know. I don't know what other reason he would have to say that, you know, but just to protect those titles. Because, to be honest, Mikey Garcia very likely would smash Linares. You know, Linares is a good fighter. He's very talented, but he just doesn't have the pop in his punches to really take advantage of the speed that he has and the setups, you know. He's got some pretty nice setups. He sets his punches up kind of well, but they wind up becoming very predictable. You know, I just watched his last fight against that Filipino guy, and the whole time, oh God, the whole time I was watching that fight, I was so mad at Freddie Roach. Freddie Roach's cornering in that fight was just so goddamn atrocious. He gave him literally no advice. You know, he was just saying a bunch of stuff. You gotta get him against the ropes. You gotta press forward. You gotta do this. He wasn't telling him anything. You know, like, he was just saying a bunch of bullshit, you know, and it made me so mad because that kid has the talent. He had the skill to really take it to Linares, especially because Linares was being so predictable. Why wasn't Freddie Roach able to see it? You know, I can't remember the dude's name, but he kept trying to counter Linares' punches with the right hook. You know, he thought that that's how he was going to really put it to Linares, and he didn't realize that it was the left hand that he needed to transfer his weight and pivot and turn into the left hand when Linares would throw his right hand, because Linares was telegraphing his right hand all night long. Even though it was fast, it was so quick. It wasn't until really late in the fight that guy started really letting his left hand go off of the counter, and he wound up catching Linares a couple times, but you know, by then it was too late. But I was so mad about Freddie Roach's coaching. But anyway, you know, Mikey Garcia trying to protect those titles. You know, obviously he only wants to fight for titles right now. So telling him that if he fights Lomachenko, that he'll never get a fight with Mikey Garcia, you know, is interesting, because which one do you think is a bigger draw, right? Mikey Garcia or Vasily Lomachenko? Especially after his performance against Guillermo Rigondeaux, which, to be honest, I don't even know how many people saw that fight. You know, I didn't look at any of the numbers. Obviously, it wasn't on pay-per-view, even though, you know, on paper it was a pay-per-view type fight. But it would be so interesting to see where Vasily Lomachenko goes after beating Linares, right? And I wonder, like, if fighting Linares is even something that he should be looking to do, you know, because where does he go from there, right? So he wins a bunch of 135-pound titles. I don't even know. Let me see what titles he has right now, or what. Let's see. So he fought Rigondeaux at 130. So he hasn't fought. I guess that would be a good move for him. Let me see. What's that dude's name? Jorge Linares. Yeah, 135. So fighting him at 135 would be a great, a good move for him, because it's on his way to moving up. I don't think that he has any more fights at 130. But who does he fight after he fights Jorge Linares, right? Like, are any of those guys going to want to jump into the ring with him? Let's see who else has a title at 135. You know, I've been watching Jorge Linares and been a big fan of Jorge Linares for a long time. Where's that guy that he fought a long time ago? Oh, man, his fight with Rocky Juarez. Man, poor Rocky Juarez. I think that guy, you know, he was a silver medalist in, I think, like the 1996 games. I'm not sure. Maybe it was the 2000, but that guy never won a title ever. And he was a good fighter too, Rocky Juarez. Definitely a good fighter. What's this guy's name, man? I can't find it. Maybe he didn't fight that guy. Maybe I'm tripping. Nah, I think I'm tripping. Who did that guy fight then? Anyway, let me move on. Let's see. 135. So, champions at 135. Oh, Mikey Garcia has a title there, right? Robert Easter Jr. And then has the IBF, and then the WBO is vacant. So after Lomachenko fights Jorge Linares, if that fight comes to fruition, right? Which I very well think it could. I think that's kind of the payday that Jorge Linares is looking for. You know, I don't think that he's probably expecting to beat Lomachenko, but it's also going to be pretty interesting because Jorge Linares is fucking big for that weight class. You know, he's a big guy. You know, he's not a small man. He's got a huge back and his shoulders are just massive. You know, I don't think that he can necessarily hurt Lomachenko, but he might be able to, you know, use a little bit of his size, although he's not that kind of fighter either. You know, he doesn't fight on the inside. He likes to quote-unquote box his opponents, move off the line, you know, go in and out, you know, but not a smothering fighter, not like a Salido-like fighter, and I think that plays just exactly into Lomachenko's style. I think that's just a perfect style for him to fight. But the big question is does Mikey Garcia fight? Does he move back down from 140 to 135 to fight Lomachenko after he fights Linares, right? Or is Mikey Garcia moving up so that he doesn't have to fight Lomachenko? You know, it's really interesting that as Lomachenko moves up, Mikey Garcia starts talking about, oh, I'm going to fight for the 140-pound title against Sergey Lipinets, who Mikey Garcia is absolutely going to fucking smash. He's going to smash Lipinets. Smash him. That might be a 2-round fight. Like, that fight is just going to be... that's going to be an ass beating. Like, it's going to be bad. You know, Buddy McGirt not working on the right things. Like when the right hand starts coming at him, he creates a lot of distance by slipping and moving his body to the outside and kind of putting his weight on his right leg and dipping down. You know, Lipinets does. But Lipinets doesn't know how to pivot and get out of that position. He just gets stuck there because he doesn't transfer his weight, you know. And Mikey Garcia, having, arguably the best 1-2 in boxing, is going to pound him. He's going to catch him with that right hand all night long. And if he's not able to land it to the head, he's going to land it to the body, like a short little right hook right on the sides. He's going to smash Lipinets so bad. But is Mikey Garcia looking to talk about, oh, I'm going to fight Errol Spence this year, or because he just fought Broner, right? And now he's moving up, he's going to be fighting Lipinets. Oh, excuse me. Is he going to move up to 147 and fight Errol Spence, right? Does it sound to anyone else like Mikey Garcia might be trying to, I don't want to say duck Lomachenko, right? But kind of jump weight classes to kind of get away from him, because for such a long time there was a lot of talk about that Mikey Garcia jam, right? 1 second, guys. And to be honest, I would really, really like to see that fight. I'm picking Lomachenko to beat Mikey Garcia, but if Lomachenko doesn't get to fight Mikey Garcia till they both meet at 147, I don't know if I would pick Lomachenko anymore. You know, like, I don't know how he's going to handle the weight. Obviously, I pick him on skills, you know, but Mikey Garcia is already a huge puncher. You know, what is he going to do when he gets to 147? You know, but anyway, the more interesting thing, the next very interesting thing that I think is complete, you know, bull. Lomachenko versus Pacquiao in November. Come on. For real? Anybody believe that? Doesn't this happen every year? Doesn't Bob Arum use Pacquiao's name to promote somebody else every year? He's like, Pacquiao's going to fight this guy. Pacquiao's going to fight that guy. Like last year they were talking about Pacquiao was going to fight Terrence Crawford, right? And then did Terrence Crawford fight him? No. They just moved on and they were like, oh yeah, he fought Julius Ndongo. He had a great year, right? But he didn't fight Pacquiao. And I think that that's going to be the same thing. I think that they're just kind of trying to push that, especially since Lomachenko is barely moving up to 135 right now, right? And Pacquiao, you know, being a small welterweight, right? He could move down to 140, right? Pretty easily. But is he going to move down to 135 to fight Lomachenko for a 135-pound title? I mean, it's possible. But is that really going to happen? I don't think so. I think that that would be ridiculous. It'd be a great fight. It'd be really fun to watch. We've never seen Lomachenko fight anyone nearly as athletic as he is, you know, aside from Gary Russell. But Gary Russell, even in spots, looks a little, I don't know, I don't want to say off balance, but he looks a little like, not squared up, just, he looks a little tight, you know, not like an athlete, you know. Like physically he looks like an athlete, but he doesn't look like at any second he could do a handspring into a backflip kind of athlete, you know. Pacquiao is always very fluid and, you know, fast, and it'd be a great fight. But I would pick Lomachenko to beat Pacquiao. But I don't think it's going to happen. Regardless, I don't think it's going to happen at all. Let's see the next thing. Roy Jones Jr., the most talented fighter ever. That's a bad article. Nobody should read that. Billy Joe Saunders. I want the winner of Canelo Golovkin. I'll hold every title in 2018. Interesting. You know, if before the Billy Joe Saunders David Lemieux fight, I would have laughed at this. You know, I would have thought that was a ridiculous claim. But Billy Joe Saunders looked really good in that fight. I don't think, obviously, Golovkin is no David Lemieux, right? Golovkin is a serious fighter. He's a serious contender. But did David Lemieux, or did Billy Joe Saunders beat David Lemieux? You know, in spots he did, right? In spots he was, you know, giving him a beating, right? But a lot of the fight wound up being, you know, I don't want to say Billy Joe Saunders running, right? But Billy Joe Saunders, you know, game planning against David Lemieux. You know, staying away from his power, you know, moving away. I don't remember if David Lemieux even landed a single punch, you know, like any good punches. But Golovkin is much better at fighting that kind of style than David Lemieux is. And Billy Joe Saunders being a southpaw, when we watched what's his name, Daniel Jacobs fight a very similar fight against Golovkin. Daniel Jacobs was trying to outpoint him and kind of stay on the outside and, you know, outbox him and use a game plan, control him with the jab. Daniel Jacobs fought a very good fight. You know, he used a lot of high-level skills that I've never seen him use before, really coming together. And Golovkin had his best moments in the fight when Danny Jacobs was in his left-handed stance, right? He was able to knock him down. He was able to hurt him. He did a great job fighting the left-handed style. So I wouldn't pick Billy Joe Saunders to beat Golovkin, but I do think it's going to be a much better fight than I did, you know, 3 months ago. As far as, you know, the rematch, and I'll talk about the rematch of Canelo Golovkin in a second, but if Canelo winds up with the titles and fights Billy Joe Saunders, I could definitely see Billy Joe Saunders beating Canelo. Canelo's just not, he doesn't know how to put the pressure on, being the counterpuncher style. I don't think he knows how to put the pressure on enough to beat Billy Joe Saunders. And just like like Teddy Atlas said when Canelo fought Erislandy Lara, right? Erislandy Lara was a very basic fighter then. You know, God, he was basic. He had great strategy, right? But he didn't know how to set his punches up. He didn't know how to control his opponent. You know, he didn't use any feinting or, you know, head movement or, you know, lead hand control. He didn't do any of that stuff. And he was able to make Canelo, you know, have a very close fight with Canelo. I have watched the fight, and I've rewatched it recently, but I wasn't watching it like to score it, right? But a very close fight, not because of the fact that it was one fighter was, or not a very close fight in regards to like punch output and how they both landed a lot of punches, but close in that both fighters' offenses were very limited, right? And there wasn't a lot of action, and that's why it was close. And I could see a very similar fight with Billy Joe Saunders, but Billy Joe Saunders showing a little bit higher level of skill now than Erislandy Lara showed back then, you know, with the lead hand control, with all the feinting and being able to control the distance. Even if Billy Joe Saunders isn't able to ever hurt Golovkin or Canelo, like he could never, I don't think he could ever hurt Canelo. If Gennady Golovkin couldn't hurt him with that huge right hand, ooh, and we'll talk about that in a second. This is going to be really interesting. Billy Joe Saunders, I would give him a chance to beat Canelo for sure. But I wouldn't, oh man, I'd give him a small % chance to beat Golovkin, and it wouldn't be, neither win of these two fights would be like a dominant performance. Like it was on the scorecards for Lemieux, it was a very dominant performance, right? He shut Lemieux out, but there were very few rounds where he was really piecing David Lemieux up and making a fight of it, right? And neither win would be one of those fights where he's really piecing the guy up, but it would be a very close point, like reminiscent of Trinidad De La Hoya, right? Where each fighter lands a couple punches, you know, even though I thought De La Hoya smashed Trinidad and won that fight. But like the later rounds of that fight, how they were close, but there was a lot of, you know, controlling or keeping the space, maintaining the distance, not controlling the space, right, but maintaining space. So like very like inactive kind of style of fight. But I could see Billy Joe Saunders winning in those kinds of fights simply by not getting knocked out. Not against Golovkin, but definitely against Canelo. Canelo is just not as fleet-footed enough, I don't think, to catch Billy Joe Saunders. Even though he very well may be able to find a rhythm to start timing Billy Joe Saunders. But I would give the nod to Billy Joe Saunders in that fight. I think I'd definitely have to do some film study and kind of look at Canelo fighting left-handed fighters a little better. But yeah, that's what I think. Now getting to the next piece, and this is really interesting. Actually, yeah, no, I'm going to talk about Canelo Alvarez versus Gennady Golovkin. Now, this is such an interesting fight, right? The first fight, you know, some people thought Canelo won, some people thought Golovkin won. You know, I think it was like 70% of people thought that Golovkin won, and like roughly 30% thought it was Canelo won, and then some percent thought it was a draw. You know, to be honest, I'm not mad at a draw, right? And at the time, I wasn't mad at a draw, but I think the biggest reason why I wasn't mad at a draw was just because I know I was so grateful that Gennady Golovkin did not lose his titles off of that performance. I thought that was an amazing performance from Golovkin. I also thought it was an amazing performance from Canelo, who I didn't think would be able to perform at that level, fighting Golovkin. Now, there are a lot of caveats to this. You know, and when I do a breakdown of the fight leading up to Gennady Golovkin versus Canelo 2, which I am going to break down, and I'll re-break down the rounds and talk about them, but I'm going to start from the middle of the rounds where most of the game planning stuff kind of goes away, and they start fighting, they just really start fighting each other. But some of the interesting things, like this first article talking about Canelo is promising to knock out Gennady Golovkin. Come on, boy. You really think you're going to knock that boy out? Come on, look at how much bigger he was than you, man. He was a giant. Did anybody else notice how much bigger Golovkin was in this fight than in his previous fights? He was fucking massive. He was huge. Does anybody know why? Anybody real quick know why Golovkin was so much bigger in this fight than he was in his previous ones? Because of the fact that Oscar De La Hoya and Canelo Alvarez appealed to the IBF title. I think it's the IBF, the one that has the 10-pound rehydration limit. They appealed to them and said, hey, we're not going to fight for your title. We're not going to fight for your title if we have a 10-pound rehydration limit, because we have all these other titles to fight for, right? So they literally changed the rules of boxing and title fights so that they would be able to fight for the title and not have to have the 10-pound weight rehydration limit, right? And obviously, like, they agreed to do that, but only when other titles are being fought for, right, for whatever reason, because it makes sense, quote unquote. But because of that, Golovkin was bigger than we've ever seen him, right? And the interesting thing was, I don't think that Gennady Golovkin knew that that was going to be the case throughout his entire training camp. I don't think he knew that was going to happen. And I think that Canelo probably had a leg up on that. And that's why he was able to come in so much bigger as well. Because, to be honest, Canelo looked huge as well, right? But it's interesting because, you know, maybe people thought that Golovkin didn't look as good of a fighter, but also he might not have been used to fighting at that weight because he was so much bigger than he usually is in his fights, because he didn't have to worry about that 10-pound weight advantage, right? Or that 10-pound rehydration limit to keep his title. So it'll be interesting to see how much better Golovkin fights in this fight now that he will be more used to fighting at that weight, at that actual weight, rather than his usual weight where he's so much more nimble and so much quicker, you know, maybe quicker, I'm not sure. It's hard to tell because he's usually much faster than his opponents, but Canelo was really quick in this fight too. So was Golovkin slower, or was Canelo just fast enough to make him look slow, right? Who knows? I still thought that he was very quick. This fight is going to be so interesting, you guys. I'm really curious to see where it goes. I'm really disappointed that Golovkin didn't get to fight Billy Joe Saunders for the title in between fights, because Canelo is kind of holding him hostage, right? Saying, "Oh, well, you're not going to get to make all that money, you know, blah blah blah." But it's another thing that's really interesting about this fight is in the first fight, Golovkin threw one body shot, right? Did anybody else notice that? One freaking body shot the whole fight? Now, I can only assume that that was because of the pre-fight instructions, right? You've got Chapo, Mr. Reynoso, that's all I know. Chepo? Man, I don't know that guy's first name, but Canelo's coach, probably in the pre-fight instructions, complaining, oh, he throws lots of low blows, don't let him hit on the belt line, right? And in the picture that I'm looking at, right, Canelo's trunks are so fucking high. Golovkin's look a little high too, right? But Canelo's are so high, and he throws one body shot in the whole fight and gets warned by the referee for throwing a low blow, right? And it was like a perfectly good body shot. And interestingly enough, the same thing happened in the Daniel Jacobs fight. Golovkin didn't throw hardly any body shots, and he has a killer left hook to the body. But as soon as he threw a body shot against Daniel Jacobs, the referee warned him. You know, it's really interesting to see this kind of stuff. And to feel like Golovkin is kind of being limited in this regard, right? Because normally he does throw great body shots, and he throws a lot of them. But in this fight and his previous fight, he wasn't allowed to. You know, and it also kind of harkens back, if you guys watch the pre-fight instructions, Golovkin or Reynoso talking to the referee, telling the referee not to let Golovkin hit Canelo in the back of the head, right? And then you see that huge right hand that Golovkin lands, right? And if you look at the angle, Canelo, the way that Canelo was turning away from the right hand, he would turn and it kind of almost hit him in the back of the head. It kind of hit him in the neck, right? But it was because Canelo was turning away from it, right, that it wound up looking like it was on the back of the neck. And I wonder if that was a practice of Canelo in his training camp to get away from the right hand to make it look like Golovkin was fouling him so he wouldn't be able to throw that punch, you know, because the way that he would skirt out away from the right hand and move along the ropes to get away from it, it just looked like that was like part of their game plan, part of their strategy for avoiding the right hand. And it made me really disappointed in Canelo because he's a good enough fighter that he doesn't need to do that stuff. But again, you know, all bets are off when you're fighting for millions and millions of dollars and you're fighting for this crazy legacy, you know. You just do whatever you can to win, you know. Like, notice, you know, not one person anymore gives a fuck about Sergey Kovalev, right? Nobody's saying, damn, man, poor Kovalev, he got all those low blows. Oh, man, he should get his titles back. He should, you know. There was a lot of outrage at the time, right? There was also a lot of outrage at the time when he got robbed in the first fight, right? But once the rematch was set, nobody even gives a shit, you know? Everyone's just like, whatever, man, who cares? You know, moving on to the next fight, you know, oh, Errol Spence got a fight coming up, we'll move on to that. You know, and nobody remembers that there was the controversy. Nobody talks about the controversy because it's all in the past now, right? So if, you know, nobody's talking about how Golovkin won the first fight anymore, right? They're just talking about, oh, the rematch coming up, you know. The rematch of what? Of Golovkin's victory over Canelo or the draw, right? Oh, it was a draw. Okay, cool, whatever, you know. But anyway, it's going to be a great fight. I don't think in any way, shape, or form is Canelo ever going to be able to knock Golovkin out. I think that's ridiculous. But I do think that if Golovkin is allowed to throw body shots, he might be able to piece Canelo up, you know. And again, you know, one thing that you know, and this is an interesting thing too. You know, people are talking about. I'm gonna Google this real quick. So if you go ahead and do this real quick, you guys. Google Golovkin Canelo CompuBox. Go ahead and Google that for me, you guys. And we're gonna take a look at this shit and tell me in what round you see Canelo slowing down. Right, so let's look at Alvarez. Power punches, thrown and landed. Right, round one he throws 10 power punches. Motherfucker, shut the fuck up, bitch. The fuck off of here. All these fucking ads and shit. But if you go look at that CompuBox, let's talk about. We'll look at jabs first, right? Round one, Canelo threw 13 jabs. Round 2, he threw 22. Round 3, he threw 18. Round 4, he threw 15. Round 5, he threw 20. Round 6, he threw 25. Round 7, 25. Round 8, 18. Round 9, 16. Round 10, 16. Round 11, 24. Round 12, 21. Right? That's pretty even, you know. In rounds 8, 9, and 10, right, or 9 and 10 specifically, he threw, you know, 50% less jabs, but let's talk about how many more power punches he threw in those rounds too. So let's go ahead and look at the power punches. Round 1, he threw 10. Round 2, he threw 20. Round 3, 22. Round 4, 17. Round 5, 23. Round 6, 21. Round 7, he only threw 13, but he also had a record number of jabs in that round too at 25. Round 8, he threw 22. Round 9, 26. Round 10, right, in the round that he threw the least amount of jabs, he threw 38 power punches. He threw 38, right? So that definitely compensates for... Is there one that has just total punches? Okay, total punches. We'll look at that, my bad. So round 1, he threw total punches, 23. Then round 2, 42. Round 3, 40. Round 4, 32. Round 5, 43. Round 6, 46. Round 7, 38. Round 8, 40. Round 9, 42. Round 10, 54. Round 11, 41. And then round 12, 64. Tell me in what round it looks like he slows down. Tell me what round it looks like he gasses out, right? What round is it? You know, the lowest amount of punches that he threw in a round, aside from the first round, which is the slowest round, you know, usually round 4. He threw 32 punches, and that was at the beginning of the fight, right? The next slowest is 38 in round 7. Other than that, it was over 40 punches a round in every round, right? Where is he slowing down? Where is he gassing out? You know, people want to talk shit about him gassing out, and that's the reason that he lost, but there's no gassing out. He was very consistent with the amount of punches he threw in every round, and in fact, in the 12th round, he threw 50% more punches than almost any other round at 64, right? When he's averaging roughly 40 in every other round, he threw 64 punches. And in the 10th round, he threw 54. You know, when is he slowing down? You know, how is that journalism, right? Ridiculous. But let's look at let's look at Golovkin's, right? And maybe this will be the contrast that we need to see. So round 1, he threw 33 punches, 10 more than Alvarez. Round 2, he threw 38, 4 less than Alvarez. Round 3, he threw 63, 23 punches more than Alvarez. Round 4, he threw 61, twice as many punches as Alvarez, almost, you know, 29 more punches. Round 5, Golovkin threw 74 punches, 31 punches more than Golovkin, or than Canelo. Round 6, he threw 63, 17 punches more than Canelo. Round 7, he threw 58, 20 punches more than Golovkin. Round 8, he threw 65 punches, 25 more punches than Canelo. Round 9, he threw 58, 16 punches more than Canelo. Round 10, he threw 65, 11 punches more than Canelo. Round 11, he threw 60, 19 punches more than Canelo. And round 12, he threw 65, 1 more punch than Canelo, right? So the only reason that people think that Canelo was gassing out was because Golovkin was throwing more punches than him, right? Even though Canelo threw the same amount of punches roughly in every round, right? His average was very consistent, except for in, you know, in the 4th round, right? That was his low at 32, right? But he averaged roughly 40 punches in every round. It wasn't that he was gassing out and that's why he was falling behind, because to be honest, he was behind in every round. You know, he was never in the fight in terms of activity, right? So the fact that he was able to win rounds in the first place is miraculous, especially when you look at rounds like round 8, right? He threw 65 punches and he landed 21 versus 11 punches landed for Canelo out of 40 thrown. You know, very interesting stuff like that, and so much controversy, or so much is being talked about Canelo gassing out, you know, and I just think it's ridiculous. Another thing that Canelo does when he throws his punches, and one of the reasons why he might have such a low output, he does that breathing thing where you go, ha, ha, you know, when you throw your punches and you exhale and you try to be like, you try to get all your energy into the punch. That really wrecks your breath. You know, it's not good for you. You know, you wanna be fighting in a way like if you run. If anybody who's ever run track or run long distance, you want to be running and you want to be breathing and constantly breathing regularly to maintain your breathing habits, right? You don't want to exhale hard because you're going to use more energy, right? Fighters who do that also have the habit of holding their breath when they punch as well, or holding their breath when they throw combinations, rather than breathing through fluidly like a fighter like Vasily Lomachenko. And you can see how fluidly he moves, how fluidly he punches, as well as Golovkin. Golovkin doesn't do that either. And that's why he's able to have such a high volume and a high output, is because he's constantly breathing, has a regular pace. You know, like a lot of, like, you know, when you first start running in you know, middle school, you try to breathe and kind of breathe at the same time as your step, right? Breathe in, you know? And when you box and you throw punches, you kind of pick up one of those breathing patterns, and it really limits your cardio. But when you when you run like cross country, or you run long distance, you really learn that you don't want your breathing pattern defined by your strides, right? Or by how you're stepping, right? You don't want it to be breathe in on your left foot, breathe out on your right foot, right? You just want a constant breathing pattern so that you're constantly getting enough oxygen. And one of the things that Canelo does when he punches, holding his breath and expelling too much air to quote unquote get more power into his punch, right? And it really inhibits him and his ability to fight on like a cardio like level. I don't know exactly how to say that, but I think you guys get what I'm saying. But anyway, Canelo knocking out Golovkin, I don't think so. To be honest, I think that we've never seen I don't think we've seen either fighter in a rematch before, so this is going to be really interesting to see how they come into the fight, and to see how they both respond and how they both come into the fight and see their strategy for it. I was able to pick up on a few of the mistakes that Canelo makes in timing, the way that he steps and he leads on his foot, some of the disadvantages that he has in his technique, right? And Golovkin was able to pick up on them in the first fight, but then Canelo was able to bait Golovkin and take advantage of the fact that he knew that Golovkin knew that that was a disadvantage of him, and that was when he was getting timed. And it made for a really interesting first few rounds. And then once both of them kind of escaped from that and realized that it was no longer a viable source of offense for either of them, because they were both setting traps for that style, the fight really turned up, and you really got to see some boxing, some really fun stuff. But anyway, I'm really curious to see how that fight plays out, and I'm also really curious to continue my film study on that fight and get those videos up. The reason I stopped doing it was because I started getting hit hard with copyrights. But anyway, Canelo Alvarez knocking out Golovkin, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I think that the latter could very well be true. I think that Golovkin may be able to knock out Canelo if he's allowed to throw body shots. If not, it's just going to be more of the same of the first fight. But anyway, moving on. Real quick, we're going to talk about Mayweather versus Conor McGregor. Now, when my channel got taken down, so my channel got taken down a few months ago, like 8 months ago or whatever, I think in July, maybe May, June or July, one of those months, I created another boxing channel, and I started posting videos up of McGregor versus Mayweather, and started talking about it because it was a really interesting fight for me. McGregor is a better fighter than Mayweather. He's not a better boxer, right? But he's a better fighter. He understands, just like I was talking about Anderson Silva, right? Fighters in the UFC, on average, are much better fighters than boxers because of the fact that the sport is so much more dynamic. You have to be so much more well-rounded in your knowledge in how to set your punches up because the consequences are so much more dire, right? You don't set your leg kick up well enough. Oh, someone's going to grab your leg and take you down and elbow you in the face until you're knocked out. It's such a brutal sport. In boxing, if you get knocked down, right, say you're not able to roll with the punch well enough, you get knocked down and all that happens is you get 10 seconds to stand back up and be like, dang, what did I do wrong? Okay, let me fix it. If you get knocked down in mixed martial arts and you're actually hurt, the fight is over. You're going to get blasted, right? And the champions, all the great fighters, they understand this and they know this, and they understand that you have to have so much more control over your opponent. And that's also something that McGregor does so well, is controlling his opponents. Like that uppercut that McGregor landed on Mayweather, right? That was a beautifully set up uppercut. He was able to bait Mayweather into throwing that punch and walking right into that uppercut. Even though he was not, doesn't have nearly enough power in these gloves to hurt Mayweather, Mayweather was able to kind of piece him up with experience later on in the rounds. McGregor did a great job fighting him and winning a couple rounds, in my opinion. Do we want to see a rematch? To be honest, I wouldn't mind a rematch, a boxing rematch between him and Mayweather. I thought it was a good fight. It was really entertaining for me. Maybe if McGregor has more time, to like learn boxing. And one thing that people don't know, McGregor started boxing when he was 12 years old. He's not an amateur, Well, I mean, technically, he was an amateur boxer before the Mayweather fight because it was his first professional boxing fight. But he's not a scrub, He's been boxing almost all his life, Not as long as Mayweather, but roughly, since he was 12 and he was 28, right? So, 14 years. 16 years, sorry. But anyway, Floyd Mayweather fighting a UFC bout against McGregor, completely laughable. Absolutely, hysterically, terribly bad idea for Mayweather. If McGregor is able to use any kinds of kicks, he's going to kill Mayweather. If he's able to use any kinds of takedowns, he's going to kill Mayweather. Unless it's just a boxing match in the octagon, Mayweather is going to get his fucking ass kicked. And there's just no reason to have the fight. They're talking about, in the MMA podcasts that I listen to, having it be like a limited rules MMA fight. And having, Mayweather's only allowed to be on the ground for like 10 seconds. And then they have to stand it up. Which will be weird because sometimes it'll be 8 seconds, sometimes it'll be 7 seconds, sometimes it might be 10 or 11 or 12, right? But even in that amount of time, McGregor has the skills to armbar Mayweather or choke him out or do anything. And if, like I said, if McGregor is allowed to kick at all, like any kind of kick or knee, he is going to kill Mayweather. Mayweather will have no chance to win that fight. Like, literally zero. Like, if the fight happens and they have MMA rules and McGregor is able to kick, I will literally sell everything that I fucking own and put money on McGregor knocking Mayweather out in the first round. I will sell goddamn fucking everything I own to put money on that. I'll sell my car. I'll sell my goddamn laptop and my microphone that I use to make videos. Everything. Anyway, next topic, Keith Thurman. And this is really hotly debated and really interesting. Keith Thurman, obviously he's coming back and he's going to be fighting who? Not even a top 10 guy, right? And everyone's probably going to be mad at that, like, poor guy, he had surgery on his elbow. I don't know if you guys have ever had a problem with your elbow, but in my second amateur fight ever, I noticed this guy was trying to counterpunch me, and he's a little bit bigger than me because I always had to fight bigger guys. But I kind of feint him. I know that he's counterpunching, so I feint him with the jab, and I slip to the inside, right? And I throw a right hand, boom, and I catch him with a good right hand, but I'm left-handed, right? So there's no fucking power in it because at this point in my boxing career, I have no idea how to get power into my right hand. And I catch him with it, boom, and he counterpunches me with his own right hand, and because I slipped and caught him with his, he punches me in the elbow. And what happens is, and this is in the first 20 seconds of the fight, and it's I don't know exactly like how do you say it, like, but you have this sac of fluid in your elbow called a bursa sac, and I couldn't throw my right hand for the rest of the fight. I just couldn't move it. I couldn't extend it. If I extended it all the way, I just got this flaring, crazy pain, and my whole arm would give out. It was just insane, and I just couldn't throw it as a punch. So I fight the guy for 3 rounds with one hand. But an elbow problem, when you're throwing punches, especially one as bad as Keith Thurman, right? He said that he had bone fragments in his elbow. Very serious. Every time you extend your elbow, you're going to be grinding those bone fragments onto your into your elbow. Oh, and by the way, I don't know if you guys care, but I smashed that guy. I fucking broke his nose. because I'm left-handed, so I had my left hand still. I wound up smashing him. But anyway, if you have all those bone fragments in there, you got to get them removed. You got to have the surgery, and you also got to ask yourself, why do you have bone fragments in your elbow in the first place? You know, and it's very similar. He talked about it. It's a very similar surgery that professional baseball players have when you're flapping your arm like that and you're really throwing it and getting all that power. That's why he's called one time, right? And that might also be why he's had a lack of knockouts, is because of the pain in his elbow, right? He doesn't have the confidence to throw it. Now the question is, when is he going to be fighting Errol Spence, right? When do you guys want to see him fight Errol Spence, right? Everyone wants to see him fight Errol Spence right now. But let me ask you a question, right? Let me Google this and make sure. So Deontay Wilder. We're going to look at Deontay Wilder right now. And Deontay Wilder is 39-0 with 38 knockouts, right? 38 knockouts. Now, who's the one guy that he hasn't knocked out? Do you guys know? Bermane Stiverne. Very good fighter, right? Bermane Stiverne is a very good fighter, very talented. And even though he got smashed when he fought Deontay Wilder schooled him, you know, even though Bermane Stiverne was able to land some good punches, you know, and have some good rounds, he got smashed, right? But he was able to go 12 hard rounds with Deontay Wilder. What happened with Bermane Stiverne, though, in this last fight, right? So he hadn't fought he hadn't fought since November 2015, and now he's fighting in November 2017. Almost a 2-year layoff between fights, right? And he had one tune-up fight after he fought Deontay Wilder. He fought Deontay Wilder in January of 2015. Then he had one tune-up fight in November, and then he went straight into a rematch with Deontay Wilder in 2017 at the end of the last year, right? And what happened? He got fucking smashed, man. He got smashed. He fought for not even one round. He didn't do anything in that. He put his gloves up and got punched in the face and then claimed that he got punched in the back of the head because he was just getting smashed. You know, he didn't have anything that he needed to do. He didn't have, like, you know, whatever training camp. I think he came in like overweight. I think he was really big. Let's see. Let's check that out. Let's see if we can even figure that out. Bermane Stiverne. So Bermane Stiverne, no, I guess he was about the same weight, right? But because of the fact that Bermane Stiverne only had one fight in between that fight with him, right? In 2 years, he only had one fight, whereas Deontay Wilder had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He had 5 fights in between that time. What the ring rust that Bermane Stiverne had, you know, his timing, his reflexes, all of that. And people talk about ring rust like it's not real, you know, but ring rust is real. It's not like as bad as people think it is, but your timing is just a little bit off. You're just not used to being in there with someone who's trying to kill you. You know, you have your training partners in the gym, and you kind of work slow, and you kind of think you get lost in your own mind that you think that your opponent is going to fight you like your training partners, right? But your training partners, they should almost never be turning it up on you, right? Like hardcore. And if you're like Bermane Stiverne, you know, world-class fighter, who's going to be able to turn it up on you anyway, right? What kind of training partners do you got to go get? To really put it on you, to make you realize, oh, you know, you got to work on your timing, you got to work on your reflexes, right? So the point that I'm trying to make right here is Keith Thurman, he fought one time in 2017, right? So he fought, let's go back to 2015, right? He fought Luis Collazo in July, right? Then he fought one time in 2016 against Sean Porter in June, right? 11-month layoff, right? Then he fights Danny Garcia, 9-month layoff in 2017. That's his only fight, right? He still beats Danny Garcia, but now it's going to be a year and 2 months since he's had a fight, and people want him to go fight Errol Spence, right? But what kind of fight do you want between him and Errol Spence, right? The Errol Spence fans, right? The ones that aren't real boxing fans, and, you know, or the ones that are just like, you know, you got those fans that are just, they hold on to one fighter and they're like, this is the dude, man. I'm picking him to be the greatest of all time. And that's more important for them than watching good fights, right? They want Errol Spence to fight Keith Thurman now while he's got that ring rust, while he's not ready, right? While he's off of his surgery and he might not have the confidence in his right hand, right? But what as a boxing fan, what kind of fight do you want? At the end of the fight, after Errol Spence smashes Keith Thurman, who's got ring rust, what do you want Keith Thurman to say? Oh man, he was the better fighter. You know, it was a great fight. I did my best, and I just didn't have what it takes. Errol Spence is the truth. You know, is that what you want to hear? Or do you want to hear the ring rust of Keith Thurman say, oh man, I couldn't find my timing. You know, I just couldn't put my punches together. You know, I just felt off all night. You know, I think it was the weight cut. And then, you know, have like a million excuses. Oh, my elbow was acting up a little bit. You know, what do you want to hear at the end of the night, right? Do you want it to be a good fight? Do you want it to be, or do you want it to just be Errol Spence smashing Keith Thurman? Because at this point, you know, a 14-month layoff, very likely Errol Spence would just smash Keith Thurman, and that wouldn't have anything to do with Keith Thurman's skills, Keith Thurman's ability to fight. That wouldn't have anything to do with any of that. It would just be the ring rust, you know. It wouldn't be Errol Spence's ability to beat Keith Thurman, even though that may be the case, right? He might just smash Keith Thurman anyway, you know. But what kind of fight do you want to see, right? Do you want the best Errol Spence versus the best Keith Thurman, right? Now, do you guys think that it's wrong of Keith Thurman to fight a tune-up, right? To be like, oh man, I just had surgery, right? I just fought 2 undefeated fighters in my weight class, you know, Sean Porter and Danny Garcia. I think Sean Porter already had a loss, actually. I don't know who beat him, though. Let's see. Let's take a look. Oh, yeah, Kell Brook had beat him. But, like, you know, you fight a fucking killer like Sean Porter, right? And then straight into undefeated semi-killer Danny Garcia, right? And Danny Garcia can bang, you know, even though he's kind of lacking boxing skills and shit, you know, he's kind of basic, you know. He can bang, man. That boy can fight. He can hit hard. But what kind of fight do you want, right? Is it really ducking Errol Spence if he knows that he's not ready for that fight, right? Is he not ready because Errol Spence is such a beast, right? And that's what he's worried about? Or is he not ready because he's been on this layoff, because he had this elbow surgery, right? Now here's another question, right? So what should happen with Keith Thurman, right? He hasn't fought in over a year, right? Not a year yet, but it'll be over a year once he does fight. Next month it'll be a year. Should Keith Thurman be stripped of his titles, right? He's got the WBA and the WBC belts, but since he had to sit out the whole year and he's not fighting for these organizations, should he have just been stripped, right? Now, does him being stripped mean that the Errol Spence fight is any less appealing? No, right? But that would take a lot of the heat off of him having to defend his titles, right? Because right now, not only is he going to have his warm-up fight, right? But Sean Porter is his mandatory. Sean Porter, I don't think in any way, shape, or form is Sean Porter going to take step-aside money so that Errol Spence can have his unification with Keith Thurman, right? And Sean Porter fought his mandatory. Sean Porter was already the mandatory, right? And then he fought Adrian Granados for the mandatory slot. I believe that's how it went. Even though he was already the mandatory. So Sean Porter is like doubly the mandatory. Doubly the mandatory for the fight. Let's see. Yeah, he fought Keith Thurman. Oh yeah, and then he beat Andre Berto, and I think that was what got him his #1 position for that belt. And then beat on Adrian Granados for the #1 spot, right? So Keith Thurman, you know, he's in a very precarious situation because he has 2 belts that he needs to defend, that he needs to fight his mandatories for. and he has to get his, his tune-up bout, because you can't just be going fighting champions like that unless you're Bermane Stiverne and you just want the paycheck, right? So I don't think that Keith Thurman is ducking Errol Spence, because at the moment all his excuses are valid, and I don't want to call them excuses because I believe them. I understand, and I agree with him in not fighting Errol Spence right now. It would be a bad move for him, and also be a bad move for boxing, because that's not a fight that we want to sully. We don't want to ruin that fight simply because Errol Spence is being a little impatient, And to be honest, though, the last year or whatever, however long it had been before the most recent comments from Errol Spence, I really respected Errol Spence and his understanding of the situation, And the thing is, although he's come out in the media and said Keith Thurman's ducking him or Keith Thurman doing this, I think that Errol Spence does actually, in fact, understand the situation. I think he does understand that he's got mandatories. He just picked up a mandatory himself. And I think that he knows, I think in his mind he thinks that the only way he's going to really make that fight and also make it a super fight is by constantly calling Keith Thurman out, right? So, to be honest, I don't think that Errol Spence thinks that Keith Thurman is ducking him, and I do think that Keith Thurman thinks Errol Spence thinks he's ducking him, right? But I don't think that Keith Thurman is ducking Errol Spence. I do think that that's a fight that he wants. And to be honest, I think that that's a fight that he needs to take as soon as possible. Not because of the ducking accusations, but I think that Keith Thurman, if he's going to win that fight, he needs to catch Errol Spence before he gets any better. Because the difference in Errol Spence's fight against Brook and his fight against Peterson is massive. That was because if Errol Spence had done, use that lead hand control, right, constantly feinting and probing and controlling Peterson, if he had done that to Kell Brook, he could have shut Kell Brook out of that fight too. Excuse me, guys. I'm so sorry. Still a little sick. I feel fine. But my throat is still a little messed up. I got a lot of mucus and stuff. My bad, guys. But anyway, just some really interesting stuff. And I don't think that Keith Thurman is actually ducking Errol Spence. And I do think that that's going to be a really good fight. At the moment, I was favoring Keith Thurman before the Peterson fight. I was favoring Keith Thurman in that fight because of that big right hand, because of his ability to land it, because of the fact that Errol Spence doesn't move his head. But at the moment, I'm actually favoring Errol Spence. I don't know if he's going to be able to take Keith Thurman's right hand, but I do know that if he's able to control Keith Thurman like he did to Peterson, he's going to be able to slow down Keith Thurman's offense enough that he might be able to take enough of those right hands to win the fight. But I do know 100% that we're going to see what kind of chin Errol Spence really has when he fights Keith Thurman, because the lack of head movement, and then seeing that stupid ass video that my homeboy sent me about Errol Spence's trainer talking about how head movement is a waste. That horrible video. Like, think about this, guys. Now, this is amazing. Like, this is absolutely mind-blowing boxing, you guys. Think about, like, everything that you've seen on my channel when I talk about film study, when I talk about how important it is to have an active guard, how important it is to move your head, especially if you watch grading a fighter. Like, I have a grading a fighter video, B-level fighters, and my grading scale is definitely skewed. It's not the same grading scale that most people give. C-level fighters in my C-level category, those are A-level fighters in the general boxing public. But B-level fighters are like, Floyd Mayweather, because I don't think he has the offense, right? No dig against him, right? A good defense beats a good offense, and that's why Mayweather gets the defensive score of a B. But in that video, you can see how Mayweather's active guard and his head movement is able to offset Marcos Maidana's offense, right? And stop him from being able to land his jab and stop him from being able to set up his punches. But also, you can see how that static defense of Marcos Maidana, right, who gets a B grade for his offense, he has fantastic offense, how his head movement and his active guard, he's able to slip Mayweather's jabs that he doesn't even see coming because his head is constantly moving. Now, the amazing thing is, if you guys watch that video, Google that video of Errol Spence's trainer talking about head movement being a waste of energy and a waste of time, or being a bad strategy, you can see that although Errol Spence is a world champion and his coach is the one that's taken him there from the beginning, that he has very, very, very flawed logic and a very flawed understanding of boxing and the sport of boxing. So even these guys who are great trainers, who have world champion fighters, and Errol Spence as a world champion who is listening to this guy, they have flawed logic about boxing, a flawed understanding, and that you can be a world champion and still not be, still not know everything about boxing, right? I also have this video on George Foreman where he fought Michael Moore, and Michael Moore talks all this shit in the Legendary Nights from HBO, talks all this shit about George Foreman, saying it was a lucky punch, and that was one of the most haunting knockouts of Michael Moore's career, and he was never able to go back and do film study on it and to see how George Foreman was able to set up that right hand and use the block removal technique to pull his guard down and crack him with that right hand, right? Even Michael Moore, who's one of the greatest light heavyweight fighters of all time, he's a great champion, doesn't know everything, right? And it's really telling to get to see videos like that and to hear them say give these flawed interviews about what's important in boxing and what's not, and this and that, and it's really interesting. So it really gives you the understanding that not everybody knows everything about boxing. Even I don't know everything about boxing, right? I mean, not really, man. I'm a G, you know what I'm saying? But even professional fighters and professional trainers who have differing philosophies on boxing, right, can be wrong, right? But anyway, moving on. I don't think Keith Thurman is ducking Errol Spence. I think he's got a long way to go into getting some regular fights. Maybe he needs to fight twice this year and then fight Errol Spence at the end of the year. But it looks like he's not going to fight him this year, which is disappointing. But for boxing, I think it's important that we get the best Keith Thurman versus the best Errol Spence. And also that's going to give us time to sort out the Crawford Horn, and then maybe Crawford and Errol Spence will fight. But what would also be interesting is if Keith Thurman was stripped of his titles, and then Errol Spence could fight for those titles while Keith Thurman fixes his shit, right? And Errol Spence, or then Crawford is able to maybe pick up another title, and then Keith Thurman is able to heal, have his tune-up bouts, and then be placed as the mandatory when he's ready, right? I think that would be really fair and really interesting, and then you'd get to see much more great fights. But anyway, moving on to the next piece. Man, this is like an hour and 13 minutes already. It's a long time. Maybe I should just stop it and do another video tomorrow or something. Well, I really want to talk about this one. This one's dope, man. This is gonna be a banger of a fight, especially after the last fight where Erislandy Lara fought that guy. Let's find out what that guy's name was, because that guy was good. Erislandy Lara. He fought Terrell Gosha. And that guy was like, I think he was an Olympic fighter. I think he fought in the Olympics. Very good fighter, and Erislandy Lara smashed him. It was a good fight. They both landed some great punches. It was fun to watch. And even though I said to myself, Erislandy Lara is a boring fighter to watch because he doesn't know how to set up his punches and he fights to counter punch. And he only looks to take advantage of your opponent's mistakes. and he has a style where he's, I don't want to say running, right? Because I don't want people to get mad at me, but he runs to make, and he stays away from you so that he can get you to make mistakes more often, right? So that he can counter and take advantage of those mistakes by forcing you to make them, by mitigating the amount of offense you're able to throw against him. And it's an interesting style, right? But it's not one that's fun to watch. However, in this fight, excuse me, he was able to put the pressure on Gosha and set up his punches. He used a lot of feinting, a lot of probing, and he was able to make a really good fight out of it, and was able to make it very entertaining. And I kind of fell in love with Erislandy Lara's fighting style all over again. I'm not sure who the first person I ever saw him fight was, but it was a long time ago. Let me see if I can find it. Man, I don't know, man. I watched the Paul Williams fight. I was really disappointed in the Vanes Martirosyan fight. That really made me sad because I'm a big fan of Vanes. Vanes, the Nightmare Martirosyan. Big fan of him. But anyway, the Jarrett Hurd fight is going to be, that's going to be a banger of a fight. And I think that Jarrett Hurd, now this is interesting because I picked what's his name? Austin Trout. I picked Austin Trout to smash Jarrett Hurd. I thought he was going to smash him. I thought it was going to be an easy fight for Austin Trout. But what Austin Trout showed up, right? Which one was it? It was the one that hadn't fought in, let's see, he fought in 2016 in May, and then his fight against Jarrett Hurd was October of 2017. So 17-month layoff. 17 months. And that's the kind of Austin Trout that we got. I thought that he was still piecing up. Jarrett Hurd. I thought he was, controlling the space pretty decently. He was able to land his left hand almost at will. And I thought he did a great job fighting him. But that was a guy that had, a 17-month layoff. And he wound up, not having the greatest timing, not having the greatest form, not being in, I don't want to say he was in bad shape, right? But he's always been a little bit awkward, but he was so much more awkward in this fight than he usually was, because because he had so much ring rust, he just wasn't in prime fighting condition. If he had been, active and he hadn't been, so, I don't want to say, like, out of the ring for so long, I think he would have beat Jarrett Hurd easily. I don't think he would have faded as badly. And that makes me think that Erislandy Lara is absolutely going to smash this guy. I think he's going to put a beating on Jarrett Hurd. And it's going to be the kind of fight where, maybe the 8th round, people are like, whoa, maybe they should stop this fight. I know a lot of people think that Jarrett Hurd is a tough guy. He's really good at boxing, and that he might come on strong late. But I think that Erislandy Lara, just especially with this new style where he understands how to control his opponent and keep them on the outside without committing to his punches, with feints and with probing. I think he's going to make Jarrett Hurd make every mistake in the book. I think he's going to beat the crap out of him. But I'm still really excited to see this fight because Jarrett Hurd is a tough motherfucker. He's very tough. He's very durable, and we're going to get to learn a lot about both of these fighters. Because this is exactly the kind of fighter you want to be fighting Erislandy Lara. Someone who's going to come forward and really put it on him. Someone who's really tough. I know like Alfredo Angulo was really tough too. And obviously he got smashed. And it's interesting because I don't know how much better of a fighter Jarrett Hurd is than Alfredo Angulo, if he's better at all. But I could see Erislandy Lara being able to stop Jarrett Hurd much earlier than he was able to stop then he was able to stop Alfredo Angulo, who's also a tough son of a gun. But anyway, some interesting stuff. A lot of really interesting fights coming up. I might do some breakdown of the Jarrett Hurd Erislandy Lara fight. I'm really interested to see that. I really enjoyed Erislandy Lara's last fight. I think it's going to be good. If Mikey Garcia gets signed to fight, Jorge Linares, I'll definitely do some breakdowns of that against Jorge Linares against his last southpaw, which was that Filipino guy, Mercito Gesta. Was that what it is? I'm not sure. But anyway, let me know what you guys think about the video. If you guys enjoyed it, I'm sorry I didn't have any video playing and it's just one stupid ass picture of Vasily Lomachenko. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think about my analysis of the fights and the ideas behind them and whatever other boxing gossip. And also, for anyone who's sticking around this time, if you guys have any good sites that I can go to get good boxing news so that I have stuff to talk about, I'd like to do this maybe once a week where I just talk about boxing and kind of go over, what's going on in the sport and what I think about it and whatever. But anyway, let me know what you guys think about it. Thanks, guys.